Hi everyone, this is audap. Let's check out Raging Loop on Nintendo Switch. We go for our options here. Fast text speed. Read only, sure. Yeah. Okay, hide buttons, no. Vibration, yes. Yeah. Force unlock. Use only in unforeseen circumstances such as data deletion. Oh, okay. Interesting. Character voice.
不採し
というか植松何イチャイチャし
僕は
モッチーだ
ばあちゃん
いらっ
Oh,
し
it's too
誰
low.
だ
思い
ロ
そ
わしとた
うめ
買うのか
夢疑うことなかれ。
That seems about right. Alright, let's check this out.
ペコリようこそノベルアドベンチャーゲームレイジングループの世界へ。私は単なるドルに足らないインターフェイス的キャラクターです。そうですね、リカコとでもお呼びください。ここでは初めてプレイなさる皆様にこのゲームの遊び方を簡単にご説明いたしたいと存じます。いくつか変わったところのあるゲームですので、最初はぜひとも全部の説明をお読みいただきたいと思います。特に動画配信をなさる方は4動画やシェアについてだけでも必ずお読みくださいね。最後まで読んでいただけたら私のセクシーな画像が見られません。世間は厳しゅうございます。さめざめ。さて、何からご説明いたしましょう。
Let's see. I guess let's go through the whole thing here.
レイジングループはノベルアドベンチャーゲームというジャンルでございます。小説のように文章で物語が綴られ、読んで楽しむゲームです。世に言う人狼ゲームと深く関係する物語ではありますが、人狼ゲームそのものではないのでご注意を。スーパー人工知能リカコ20人と永遠の人狼ゲームを楽しめるとご期待された方、すみません。さめざめ。もちろんただの小説ではございません。時折現れる選択肢によって物語が変化するすごい小説なのです。キャラクターたちが生き生きと描写され、生き生きとボイスを喋ります。せっかくの声をお楽しみになるためや、突如絶叫が響き渡らないためにイヤホンなどされるのも良いかと。とっても大ボリュームな物語ですので、没頭しすぎて数日徹夜なんてことになるやもご注意くださいね。なお、もうご存知かと思いますが、レイジングループは架空の殺人事件、恐怖事件を扱ったお話です。サスペンス、スリラー、ホラー、そして謎に挑み解決するお話がお好きなあなたにぴったりの物語。もちろんこの物語は作り事で、実際の人物や団体や思想や事件などとは一切関係がございません。作中の学問知識、歴史、宗教、神話、科学、医学等の知識は創作を含みます。テストに書いたら0点です。さめざめ。そして描かれる犯罪や惨劇については現実のそんな行為を推奨する意図など全くございません。 そんな感じで現実との区別をしっかりおつけになったらもう大丈夫。本作を思いっきり楽しんでくださいね。
Let's see. Special functions?
レイジングループの独特な機能について説明いたしますね。レイジングループのストーリーは複雑に分岐しております。どう分岐したのか管理するのは大変かもしれません。でも心配無用。本作ではシナリオチャートという便利機能が採用されています。メニューを開けばチャートという機能にいつでもアクセスでき、そこからシナリオの全図が見られるのです。さらにこのシナリオチャートを使えば入ったことのあるチャプターにいつでもどこでもどこからでも移動が可能。もう選択肢では必ずセーブとは申しません。これでいつでも選択肢は選び直せますのでご心配なく。
Oh, nice.
シナリオチャート機能についてはまた後でもう一度使いどころの説明がありますのでよくわからなくても大丈夫ですよ。次にキーについて。レイジングループの物語分岐はすべて選択肢を選んだ瞬間に発生いたします。後から聞くものは存在しません。その代わりいくつかの選択肢はキーと呼ばれる特定の情報がないと開くことができません。このキーを探すことこそレイジングループの大きな目的だと言えるでしょう。その探し方は実際に手に入った時に説明があるそうですのでご心配なく。ちなみに一度キーを入手して解放されたルートはセーブデータと関係なく開きっぱなしになります。逆に言うとキーが未入手の状態にはロードしても戻れません。それで読めなくなる文章はありませんのであまり困ることはないと思いますがご承知くださいね。キーがない状態に戻して遊びたいという奇特なお方には全データを初期化する手もあります。ご利用は計画的に。
Standard functions.
独特な機能に加えレイジングループにはノベルゲームとして基本的な機能が一通り揃っています。テキストウィンドウを隠す、バックログ、ロード、セーブ、既読文章のスキップ、次の選択肢までスキップ。この辺の機能はメニューを開けばすぐにお使いいただけますが、実はメニューを開かなくてもバックログとテキストウィンドウを隠す操作は可能だったりします。画面を上にフリックしてバックログ、画面を下にフリックしてウィンドウ隠し。便利ですのでぜひ覚えてくださいね。ロードやセーブはだいたい普通の仕組みです。オートセーブ機能もあるにはありますが、新しいチャプターに入るたびにセーブするだけなので頻繁にはセーブされません。霧のいいところまで読むかシナリオチャートをご利用いただくか手動セーブを活用してくださいね。次にオプション設定について。メニューから開けるオプション設定からは音量調整やテキスト表示スピード調整など様々な設定が可能です。ただ全部説明すると皆様がお眠になってしまわれるので、あとは他の説明書きや誰かさんの追加説明をお読みください。お願いいたしますね、誰かさん。
Alright, let's see what they say about sharing.
レイジングループはノベルゲーム。物語や展開やオチはとても大事。ですからそれら全てを配信されてしまいますと とても困ってしまいます。さめざめ、さめざめ。かといって、お楽しみは大勢で分け合いたいもの。それは重々承知しております。というわけで、私どもは動画配信していただける範囲を設定しております。ちなみにその範囲は、最初のメインルート丸ごと1本、プラスアルファ。具体的には、シナリオチャート上の4、潜入の9、入村方法は、で、選択肢が出るまでが配信可能範囲です。相当な長さがございますので、配信のネタにしばらく困ることはないと保証いたします。むしろ、全文読み上げる派の配信主様は、喉が潰れないか心配です。無理はなさらず、ゆったりお楽しみくださいね。ちなみに、動画配信の折には、お知らせ機能をぜひともご利用くださいませ。この後現れる選択肢で、お知らせ機能をオンにしていただいた場合、動画配信終了のタイミングで、突然、謎の羊が出現。ここまでよ、とお知らせいたします。そこで収録はお開きとしていただき、あとは考察やら、議論やらをお楽しみいただければ、幸いの極みでございます。ちなみに今は、オフの状態ですよ。
Let's turn it on.
はい、オンにいたしました。また切り替えたいときは、0、導入の、ここに来てくださいね。
Okay, I'm good. To the main story. Actually, just a second here. Okay, there we go. Gotta pick up my Amazon. Alright.
とても長くなってしまいました。ここまでお読みいただき、誠にありがとう存じます。それでは、いよいよ物語の始まりです。限りなく濃い霧と血煙の向こう。繰り返される絶望と悲嘆の果て。人狼村の真実を、どうか、その目でご覧くださいませ。ペコリ。
5/11, Sunday. Let's see, I closed in on the side of the road and killed the engine. It was steeper than I thought. My bike was on the verge of giving out, so I pushed down and deployed the kickstand. I'm lost. Maybe taking a ride down an unknown road with no sat-nav on me wasn't such a good idea. I just followed the road, so I'd figured I wouldn't get lost, but now I was in some deep shit. No, cool it. This isn't a big deal. I sighed, took note of the fact that I'd gotten lost in my pocket journal, and then pulled out a map. Suddenly, a rush of memories flitted into my mind. I guess I had to forget it. I somehow kept myself from remembering those things. After all, I'd gone on the trip to forget.
もう。
Let's go here. Then let's hide the buttons. I think it's a little distracting.
やめやめ。目の前の現実を直視。人生はシンプル。つまりこの道のごとく、真っ暗で道案内もなく、進むか返すか。考えることはそれだけ。
Let's see, going back wasn't an option in this case, so I just moved forward. Still, I wanted to know where I was, at least, so I looked down at my map. It was all Greek to me. Last time I'd seen a sign, it was still light out, meaning that I'd gotten lost after the sun had set. Sure, it was my own fault for just guessing which intersections I'd been passing through, and that it'd taken me 2 hours to conclude I was lost. Crazy to think that just 2 hours of aimless driving got me almost completely surrounded by mountains. They extend as far as the eye can see. If you flipped this scenery upside down and shook it, it's unlikely even a shred of civilization would tumble out. Besides the asphalt below, my sweet ride, the lamppost above, the first one in a while, mind you, there was nothing man-made here. The pocket map I had wasn't detailed enough for me to figure out where I was.
進むか。
I'd go as far as I could. Worst comes to worst, I could just camp at the side of the road. Two hours later, I deeply regretted ever thinking that. Basically, camping wasn't an option. This mountain road had no side to camp on. A dump truck I'd passed barely even fit in it. I'd also had my first close encounter with wild forest animals. I'd already seen 2 boars and 3 deer in those 2 hours alone. One of the deer had run parallel to my bike while intently staring at me, and I had no idea what to think of that. I'd felt like it could smell my fear and did it just to make it worse. How dare that thing do that to a human? We're the kings of this planet, damn it. I'd have to remember to eat some venison once I got back to civilization. Anyway, camping out here was a bad idea. I'd end up either as roadkill or animal food. And yet, I didn't back out. Why? Because I'm a pretty warped sort of guy, and I won't pretend otherwise. That was actually the reason why my once comfortable relationship had gone awry, and why I'd gone on this stupid trip. Still, despite acknowledging that, I chose to keep moving forward. It wasn't like I'd find a place to stay if I went back. I was actually starting to think that this experience might make a good conversation piece sometime down the road. It was really getting late at this point. Where would those roads take me, anyway? It'd probably be disappointing. Soon enough, the road became flat. I was out of the mountain pass. The forest remained abundant, though, so I still didn't see much. Even so, the streetlights and signs were enough to make me feel I was once again nearing civilization. Was streetlights the right expression for lights in a forest? I'd have to look that up. As the road grew less rugged, I realized just how exhausted I was. All this bike handling had left my hands really sore, too. I really had to rest. Suddenly, I saw something unexpected. Powerful, colorful, artificial lights. A convenience store? Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was next to an intersection between the road I was on and another, even thinner road that could probably support only a single car. The sea of trees ended, giving room for the majestic child of our consumerist society. Yeah, that was an exaggeration. Apparently even a damn store was a big deal for someone who just stepped out of the wild. It was called Fresh Market. I'd seen several of them a few times during the day. It was probably a local franchise. The building didn't look all that old. At least the parking lot looked a lot smoother compared to the other roads. This was a pretty weird place to build something like that, though. Was that close to a settlement? Or did they actually make a profit off of lost travelers? I just asked that or something. A local shopkeeper was bound to know what was around these parts. Not to mention I was thirsty. I was welcomed by a weird chime sound. It looked like a normal convenience store. There were goods on the shelves, a counter on the left, and... Whoa. The worker at the counter was so mean-looking it was scary. She was so imposing I wouldn't have doubted if someone told me she was in charge of some lady army corps.
だっせ。
Was that supposed to be a greeting? It was so damn cold it actually gave me chills. Was this store shadier than it appeared? Was I about to be stupidly overcharged? Was this how this place made a profit? By taking advantage of lost people and basically beating them out of their money? Shit, that was scary. Clearly the Wonderland had only just begun. Woohoo! I sure was excited for the beating. I grew more nervous and less enthusiastic by the second. I braced myself, but she looked down at a magazine in her hands. Oh, so she was just a slacker. Slightly disappointed, I walked around the store. It was about what you'd expect. There was a small shelf with energy drinks, followed by some stationeries, travel goods, sanitary stuff, etc., etc. There were sweets that came with toys, a shelf of cup ramen and dried food, a fridge, a freezer. It all looked normal. It was late, so the daily dish and packed lunch section were completely empty. The only special thing about this place was the section full of unpacked vegetables you'd expect to see at a green grocer's. Maybe all the rural convenience stores were like this? I was slightly surprised by that, but there weren't any local fine foods or anything, so all in all, it was an unremarkable store, if you ignored the clerk. Anyway, I took a drink and brought it to the register. Yep, she really was the highlight of this place. What kind of clerk smokes while dealing with a customer?
買うのかよ。
Yes, I was actually buying. She was the clerk, and I'd be her god, the customer.
126円。
She didn't even scan it. The exchange was at the mercy of the clerk. God is dead. Maybe I had to get mad at her?
ちょっといいですか？
あ？
実は道に迷ってしまって。
I quickly turned to Meek.
町はどっちにあるでしょうか？
あっち。
いや、できれば地図とか。
ない。
Man, this woman.
いや、そんなはずはないでしょ。コンビニなんて大体道聞かれるから、地図は常備してるもんでしょ。
知らねえよ。ないもんはねえ。おとなしく来た道戻れよ。
もう数時間迷ってるもんで、これ以上はちょっと。
その辺の床で寝てけば。
She had to be joking.
いや、お気持ちだけでいいんで、道だけちゃんと教えていただけたら。
ああ、もう、うっせえな。待ってろ。
The clerk put out her smoke in the ashtray and went to the staff-only area. She came back in no time.
あったわ。
She did have a map. Of course she did. Even more ill-tempered than usual, the clerk started giving an explanation.
これがこの店。で、十字路を北へ行け。しばらくしたら立教があっから渡れ。最初の分岐のとこに大岩があっからそこを右折してあとは直線。
この道？
んだよ。
いや、この先何もなくないです？
書かれてねえだけで集落があんだよ。
そこ以外なら？
富士吉村まで行くには峠道を2時間。こっちなら30分で着く。
Fujiyoshi seemed to be a village. It didn't look too far away, but the road leading to it was a huge branching mess. It was clearly just a paved mountain pass. I'd have enough of those for one day. I'd probably just get lost again.
じゃあ、こっち行ってみます。ありがとうございます。
金。
はい？
払ってねえだろ。茶の。
ああ、じゃあ500円。なぜ、お釣りを無断で募金箱に入れるんですか？
小銭多いとうぜえだろ。
That was a helpful line. I casually thanked her, grabbed the plastic bottle of tea, she didn't give me a bag by the way, and left the store. I drank the tea in the parking lot and looked up at the moon, obscured by clouds, but still bright enough to outshine the light of the convenience store. The clerk put me in a bad mood though, so I didn't enjoy the sight. I threw the bottle in a nearby trash can and aggressively drove away. Following the directions, I crossed the overpass and arrived at the first fork in the road. The byway she told me about was really narrow. I probably wouldn't have noticed it if it were not for the tall boulder, standing there like a roadside shrine for some traveler deity. Turning carefully, I got on the road. A minute later, I found myself in an even worse wilderness than before. A veil of dead leaves covered the ground. Tall grass sided the path, and the sky above was blocked by overgrown shrubs, making it feel like I was passing by a wooden tunnel. The road itself was a huge red flag. It was a wonder why I didn't just turn around. The exchange from before might have pissed me off more than I thought. Still, I really didn't expect the road to just end. It happened about 15 minutes in. The view ahead suddenly turned strangely dark, and a split second later, the bike tipped forward. I reflexively hit the brakes, but it was too late. I started going down a cliff. My bike tilted downwards, and its suspension was put to the greatest test yet, as we basically tumbled down to the bottom. The headlight suddenly shone on some dirt and grass. I knew that it'd be flung out of my seat, or I'd be flung out of my seat. Stifling a scream, I tried to work some steering and brake magic to slow down without collapsing. But that was too big of a task for a simple road bike. At the bottom of the cliff, it jumped higher than ever before. The suspension couldn't handle the impact, and I was launched into the air. A moment later, I heard a crash and felt an impact, after which came an unpleasant pain. An accident where I was flung out like that was a first for me. The launch was really something, too. I did a 360 in the air and fell on my back. My breathing stopped for a moment, and the pain was so bad I thought all my bones had shattered. My face and limbs seemed pretty fine, at least, though I wasn't sure if that counted as a silver lining. There was grass under my hands. I felt it even through the gloves. That and the smell of green made it pretty clear where I'd landed on. I pushed down, and my hands sunk. The grass growth was pretty heavy. It was probably the reason why I came out relatively okay. Sure, my joints creaked when I stood up, but aside from that, I was fine. It was really dark, so I couldn't really confirm it, but I was pretty sure I wasn't even bleeding. My bike, however, wasn't nearly as lucky. It was lying on its side a short distance ahead. The engine was still on. The back wheel kept on turning, making an unpleasant fricative noise. Yep, it was busted. I walked up, killed the engine, and took the key. With the headlights off, I was surrounded by absolute darkness, so I just stood and waited until my eyes adjusted. I still can't see very clearly, but it looked like this actually wasn't a cliff. I was still on a road, it just wasn't paved beyond this point. Obviously a road bike stood no chance against an unpaved road. That woman actually tried to kill me. Zigzagging through the trees, I followed the narrow footpath deeper into the forest. I tried getting on my bike up and running again, but instantly gave up. It was partially stuck in mud, so there was the risk of it slipping and getting me into another accident. Maybe I had to turn around? The moment I considered that, I thought I saw a faint light ahead. If that woman wasn't lying, the road led me to a settlement. Was I close? I reached into my jacket's pocket, took out my phone, and opened it up. As you'd expect, I was out of range. I ran the light app and shone a light to see better. Though weak, it was better than nothing. At the very least, it helped me watch where I was going. I had no idea how long I'd been walking for, but sure enough, I could see a light beyond the shrubs. It was weaker than expected. A flashlight, perhaps? I could hear water, too. I might have been near a river.
すいません
I raised my voice.
すいません誰かいませんか
Still declaring my presence, I walked forward. It was late at night. Were I to bump into someone here, the scare would probably take away a few years of our lives. That was why I figured it was best for both of us to let each other know we were here before that happened. However, there was no response. Could they not hear me over the rapids?
すいません
I shone my light ahead and realized I'd made it to an opening. Sure enough, there was a river, or a stream rather. I could see slightly more than I had while surrounded by trees. Straining my eyes, I saw a rocky river beach and the shallows. The light I'd seen was on the other side. From what I could tell, it was either a lantern or a flashlight, and it was close to the ground. I didn't see any people, though. No one responded to my shouting, either. I wasn't excited about that, but I decided to step into the water. The cold water quickly soaked my shoes and socks. I could have taken them off, but I figured that crossing a river barefoot at midnight was a bad idea. But man, was it cold. I put my phone back into my jacket. I needed both my hands free in case I fell. Not stopping or backing down, I walked towards the light. It suddenly became deeper. The water reached my knees now. That was too close for comfort. Feeling the bottom with my toes and balancing myself, I somehow avoided losing my footing. The flow was fiercer than I'd expected. If I slipped and fell, I'd probably be washed away. It suddenly hit me I was doing something really weird, but it was too late to back down. Putting my hands on the boulders and carefully checking what I was stepping on, I gradually made it to the other side. Then, with an unpleasant wet sound in my every step, I walked up to the light. I could already see it clearly. Yep, it was a flashlight, lying on the ground for some reason. There wasn't much space here. It was a narrow riverbank with a cliff right beside it. As you'd expect, I didn't see or sense anyone nearby. What the hell? Though old, the flashlight was working fine. The strength of the light told me the battery was pretty full. That meant that someone was actually using this tonight, or rather until just a few moments ago. That was the most logical conclusion. It obviously wasn't left here yesterday afternoon or evening, and yet the user was nowhere in sight, and I was near a river. Did something bad happen? Did the flashlight's owner step into the stream and get swept away? That was the most likely and worst possible scenario. However, the flashlight was left there practically buried in the pebbles. It didn't seem like someone placed it there to light things up. It was the dead of night. There was no way you wouldn't notice dropping your flashlight when it was so dark. Right. The fact that a light source was left in a place like this was strange by itself. With that considered, what was going on here? What if someone heard my stupid shouting and decided to lure me in with a light so they could ambush me? Where would they attack from? Above?
こんばんは。
I heard a voice the moment I looked up. The rock cliff was actually made of several boulders. There was a face peeking from behind one of them.
こんばんは。
ああ、人だ。びっくりした。
That was my line.
悪いんだけど、それ取ってもらえます？
The voice was feminine. I finally realized what was going on.
落としたってわけですか。
I picked up the flashlight and pointed at the source of the voice.
やん。
A high-pitched voice, slender hands shielding the light. Sure enough, it was a young woman.
眩しいな。
お、失礼。ちなみに、こっちはこういうものですが。
怖いです。下から照らさない。
実は、当方道に迷っており。
だとすると、割と究極的に迷ってますよ。
Yeah, thought as much.
ここって、人里です？
難しい質問だな。
とりあえず、助けてもらえないかと。
助ける？
雨露しのげて、野生動物がいなければ何でもいいんで。
Standing on the boulder, the young woman made a pensive face.
じゃあ、打ち来ます？
And that was the conclusion she'd arrived at. Her face told me she was 100% serious. Place. My place. By that she surely meant a house. A settlement.
いいんです。頼んどいてなんですが、遠慮を忘れてすがりたい程度には切羽詰まってるんですが。
え？男として？
ええ。いや違う。一個の生命として。数時間迷った挙句、バイクでこけて、心身ともに限界ってわけです。
あらら。なら、見捨てるのもどうよって感じじゃないです？一個の生命として。
And so I was saved. Oh, the beauty of living beings looking out for each other.
じゃあ手、いいです？
ん？
そこ、一人じゃ登れないでしょ？
True. Honestly, I didn't even realize I'd have to. Meeting another person filled me with relief, which was followed by a sudden wave of fatigue. It wasn't crippling though. She extended her left hand, so I grabbed it with my own left hand. Her slender fingers were stronger than I expected. The girl's name was Chimey Setazawa. I asked if she was related to the Shinsengumi guy, but she said that her family just adopted the name at some point in the Meiji period. She was a 21-year-old who went to a college far away from here. This was her hometown, and she was spending her post-exams vacation here. We chatted about stuff like that once she'd led me out of the rocky ravine. There was actually a proper path, so the rock climbing was pretty pointless, but I was too focused on my footing to comment. She told me about herself as soon as we reached the solid ground.
ちなみにそちらは？
名前は房石春明。東京で大学院生やってます。
あ、じゃあちょっと年上。
24だから、芹沢さんと3つ違いかな。でもまあ、同世代でしょ。
ちえみでいいですよ。敬語とかもいらないです。
じゃあ僕も、呼び捨てタメ口がいいな。
ですか？
女の子に親しくされてるみたいで、嬉しいからね。
なるほど。実は私も堅苦しいの苦手なんで、じゃあ遠慮なく。
どうぞどうぞ。ちなみに、まだ結構遠い？
そうでもないかな。もう5分くらい頑張りましょい。
What a lively girl. You could tell she was used to people.
ただ、足元に気をつけて、明かりだけ見て。
何かあるの？
この辺、石ころだらけで危ないんだ。
The moment she said that, I stumbled on a rock too big to be called a pebble.
あと、今夜はずいぶん暗いしね。
I couldn't even see the moon anymore. Nodding in agreement, I focused on following the light in her hand.
ちょっと待っててもらえます？着替えちゃうんで。
And so I did just that. Given this was a mountain settlement, I had expected some old wooden house, but she actually lived in an apartment block. It was too dark to get a good look at it. All I could see were the cheap-looking walls, like you'd expect from some old boarding house for students. Also, she lived on the second floor, in room 202. I'd heard some raindrops as we were climbing the rusty stairs, but now it was really pouring. Between that, the darkness, and the large tree right next to the building, it was nearly impossible to see what was going on outside. It felt like I was all alone in a world of nothing but the walls, the door, and the fluorescent lamp above my head. It made me feel somewhat helpless. I distracted myself from that by imagining her changing. Eventually, the door opened up.
お待たせ。上がって。
All smiles, she showed herself, now wearing sports clothes. This was kinda exciting.
なんにもないでしょ？
Look at this place. It's completely empty, huh?
何にもないね。
Yep.
でも冷蔵庫の中は、ほら！
素晴らしい。
飲みますか？
やったぜ！
Yeah, her place was really empty. It was just a small room with a low table in the middle and a fridge near the door and a large duffel bag deeper in. There were 2 old-looking bookshelves too, but they were completely empty. I wasn't bothered one bit though. Any girl's room was a wonderland to me.
じゃあ、大変だった春明さんに、お疲れ様！
地獄で出会った仏様に乾杯。
We opened up our cans, knocked them together and downed them. Hey, it was actually good. The pleasant bitterness and the refreshing carbonation made for a good combo.
おいしい！このためだけに生きてる！
その若さでそれはないでしょ
う。言い過ぎた。愛や将来にもまだ絶望してません。
ところが、就活という影が迫る。
いや、やめて！せっかくのビールがまずくなる。
She laughed and took a huge sip. It was pretty clear she could hold her drink. That aside, something really bothered me.
お誘いに乗っておいてなんだけど。
何？
Her cheeks were already red. Maybe she didn't handle her liquor as well as I thought. She had a well-featured face, and I didn't think it was wrong to consider her beautiful. Sure, her clothes weren't the least bit sexy, but I could tell she had some makeup on.
僕は完全に正体不明の自称迷い人だよね。
そうね。
君は年頃の女性、今は深夜。 ワンルームの密室で男と二人っきり。その上アルコールまで入ってしまった。
おお。
身の危険を感じたりとかは？
She kept gulping the drink even as she formulated a response. The very fact that I could just watch her do that made this a pretty risky situation, and yet...
あんまりないかな。
それは。
芹沢千恵美クイズ。
イエーイ。
問題。ふと気づいたら低層が瀬戸際にもかかわらず、芹沢千恵美は特に身の危険を感じない。なぜでしょう？
What a fun girl. This only made me like her more, increasing the danger even further.
質問 OK？
どうぞ。
僕のことがいい人っぽいという答えはなしでいいかな。
悪い人に見えるってわけじゃないけど、まあなしかな。女の子慣れしてそうだし。
That unintentional compliment showed that she actually did see me as a potential danger.
考えられる回答は大きく2つ。想定外だが何が起きても問題ない。もしくは想定通り。
ふむ？
前者はいろいろ考えられるかな。例えば、ちえみちゃんが何かやけっぱちになっていて、どうにでもなれって場合。あるいは、十分な自衛手段がある。実は護身術の達人で、僕なんか軽く乗せるとかね。
おー、論理的。春秋さん理系だね。
まあそうかな。一方で後者、つまり、この状況が君の想定通りって場合は。
例えば、私がエロエロですとか？
Wow, talk about not mincing words.
酔っ払ってきたな。さて、他には何があるでしょう？
Indeed, what other reason could a woman have to bring a stranger to her home? It would surely be something non-standard like...
僕の存在が君の利益になる例。例えば、アリバイ工作。君がここにいたと、後日僕が証言することで君が有利になる。
おー、ちゃっかり利用するわけだ。
あるいは、ちえみちゃんが恐るべき殺人鬼で僕を酔っ払わせてぶっ殺す。
はあ、ヤマンバ。いいね。ブッシュブッシュ殺しちゃう。
What kind of sound effect was that?
ちなみに、前提で出た2つのケースの他に1つあるよ。
あれ抜けてた？
うん。私がとってもいい人で、春秋さんを助けてあげたい一心だっていうケース。
Was it time for me to be ashamed of my filthy mind?
いやでも、それで自分が襲われるかもって考えたら。
わあ、襲うって言っちゃったよ、この人。
一般論ね。
She stopped talking and turned red. It was so cute I thought she was actually doing it on purpose. Man, was she drunk. And we were just on our second cans.
じゃあこういうのは？止めないともっとひどいことになる。それはさすがに忍びないな、とか？
ごめん。もうちょっと詳しく。
この辺りには怖い野生動物が出ます。明日にはこの人はズタズタに引き裂かれてしまうかもしれません。このまま見捨てたらとても寝覚めの悪い思いをするかもしれません。それならまあ止めてあげようかしら。
なるほど。リスクと善意を天秤にかけるってわけか。これは想定外。
Let's see here. Let's save. It's getting interesting, that's for sure.
想定外か。
この人だいぶ悪い人なんじゃないかって気がしてきたな。
え、そう？
だって善意を選択肢に入れる前に殺人鬼とかアリバイとかエロエロとかさ。
エロエロは君が言い出したんでしょうが。
そうだったっけ？で、答えは？
これって単なるバカ話じゃないの？
正解者には素敵なプレゼント。不正解者はブッシュブッシュ殺します。
Seriously? You're desperate, you need an alibi, you're a thirsty perv. You'd feel guilty if you let me die.
ピンポーン、正解です。
Oh, cool.
まあ実際この辺危ないしね。鹿にイノシシに野犬にクマ。
鹿とイノシシは実際見たけど、クマもいるの？
うん、月の輪だけどね。あんまり多くはないけど、昔襲われた人もいたし、ちょっと外は危ない。
なんてワイルドな。
でも本当にヤバい動物は他にいるけどね。
なんだろう。クマよりヤバい動物？
ヘビ、サル、カラス、クモ。
Huh? Were they venomous or something? I really doubted that. Those really didn't seem worse than bears.
あとオオカミ。
日本にはオオカミはいないでしょう。
いるかもよ、こんな田舎には。
She smiled and drank out of a third can.
まあ理由がどうあれ、まんまと美女宅に侵入を果たした春秋さんは自分が狼になっちゃうのかな。
やめとく。
紳士、もう一本あげちゃう。
I wasn't too sure, but I felt like she'd dodged the subject. Perhaps I wasn't being cautious enough. But then again, I'd been wandering aimlessly for a long time by now. I had enough recklessness in me to enjoy sharing a drink with a cute, if shady, girl. 5:12, Monday. The last thing I remembered was our little "when was the last time you pissed yourself while sleeping" talk. I had to tell her about the time I got so drunk I wet my pants in the middle of a boarding house. She'd laughed so hard she started frothing at the mouth and passed out. I woke up with a splitting headache. Oh man. Morning already? Light poured in through the frosted window. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 7 in the morning. I'd gone to sleep somewhere between 2 and 3, which probably wasn't quite enough sleep. At least I didn't wake up to some horror movie scene. The building wasn't in ruins, and the girl wasn't actually a skeleton, though in a way that might have been worse. Or this might have been worse. She was spread out on the floor on the other side of the mini table. Her breathing was mixed with some weird gurgling sounds. I hesitantly looked at her. The saint that saved me from the hell I was in last night, had puked in the middle of her sleep. What was I supposed to do here? As a guest, I couldn't really be too harsh on her.
ちえみちゃん
Phew.
She wasn't waking up. Well, I'd just do what little I could. There, that should be good enough. I used tons of toilet paper to clean up her mess and flush it down the toilet. It left a stain on the floor, but it was dirty to begin with, so whatever. I'd even wet a towel and cleaned up her face. Even then, she showed no sign of waking up. Some of it was on her hair and clothes, but I figured it was best if she took care of that herself.
ちえみちゃん
朝
The first hint of consciousness so far today.
ちょっと出ておくから。
Without waiting for a response, I walked to the entrance. She'd have to take a shower and change and all that, so I'd kill some time outside. I stepped into my still damp shoes with my bare feet. My socks were in the washing machine with a towel she gave me to wipe my legs, and reached for the doorknob. I opened the door and was greeted by a gust of wind. The raindrop gathered on the leaves of the tree next to the building. The raindrop gathered on the leaves of the tree next to the building flew right into my face, making me grimace. The rain from last night was already over. The sky was pretty clear, but despite that, I noticed the visibility of my surroundings was poor. The building was surrounded by leaves. The old structure was basically buried in a forest of trees, about as tall as itself. There were branches poking into the exposed hallway. It almost felt like they'd reached out and grabbed me if I wasn't careful. I kind of felt like I was in an overgrown ruin. I turned around and saw the room and Chimey just as I left them. Yep, it was all real. I closed the door. There were other rooms in this building, which made me wonder if they were occupied. Hell, I wondered the same thing about the area in general. I pushed the branches aside to see if there were other buildings nearby. Suddenly, something entered my vision. It didn't feel right. Something that shouldn't have been there. The leaves moved. The leaves I moved revealed a woman clad in curious clothing. The moment I recognized her as such, she opened her closed eyes. Did her eyes meet? Another strong wind. I shielded my face from a spray of raindrops. When I looked outside again, the woman was nowhere in sight. Was that an illusion? If not, then what? What kind of place was this? It could have been a real Hicksville, a marginal village, a bunch of actual ruins, or an illegal settlement. I had some theories, but I set them aside for now. It seemed like a place worth exploring regardless. I went down the stairs and found no sign of the woman, or anyone else for that matter. A short distance away from the building, I turned around, and sure enough, it was pretty much covered in trees. I went to the place where I saw the woman. There were footprints in the grass here. Maybe I'd find her if I followed them. They led me to an open area. It was unused, but it looked like someone was trying to do something with it. Was it supposed to be a construction site? Even if it was clearly abandoned. There were large rocks and lots of sediment near a prefab. From what I could tell, there had been a giant landslide which forced them to stop construction. The fact that plant growth was still minimal meant that it happened fairly recently. The footsteps seemed to be going down the hill next to the site. Following them, I finally saw something that could be called civilization. There was a set of paddy fields with houses nearby. So, this was actually a settlement. What a relief. I decided to keep following the footprints and approach the settlement. I came across another unpaved path that was clearly used by people and cars. Alright, why don't we stop it there, at least for just a bit. This is audap. You've been watching Raging Loop on Nintendo Switch. Seems like this could be something really, really, really interesting. This is obviously an older title, and it has only recently made its way onto the Switch. I'll be really curious to see what kind of story and trouble we get ourselves into. Apparently, this is a pretty long visual novel with lots and lots and lots and lots of different paths and a fair number of different endings. So we'll definitely check them out as time goes on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you at the next stream.